The Dark Deeds in the Forest Mansion.
Discover A Dark Night in Georgia, a gripping story inspired by true crime events in 1980s rural Georgia, USA. While names and details have been altered for storytelling, the author's goal is to explore profound concepts within a straightforward crime narrative. Dive into a world where crime, friendship, and life's consequences intersect in a compelling tale that goes beyond the surface.
At 18, I got a life sentence. Kinda makes you rethink your whole life when you know you'll be behind bars forever. At first, I was super pissed off, getting into fights left and right. Some days, I'd pick on the smaller guys, or end up beefing with someone way bigger over some small-time drama. But man, not even a year into my time, someone, no clue if they were friend or foe, slipped me this diary. I kinda brushed it off at first. But then, it hit me. This journal belonged to the person I took out. That really messed with my head. That notebook was a game changer for me. I mean, it sounds wild, but I ended up falling for the dude I took out, the very reason I'm locked up in the first place. Crazy, right? Man, I grew up dirt poor. All I really knew back then was how to swipe stuff and throw down. That was my world. I was born into a real poor family, man, and let me tell you, I didn't know squat about life, except for two things: theft and violence. See, I grew up in this rundown neighborhood where opportunities were about as scarce as a desert rain. My old man struggled to make ends meet, and my mama did her best, but we were always scraping by. It didn't take long for me to figure out that if I wanted anything more than hand-me-downs and empty stomachs, I had to find a way to get it myself. So, I fell into the wrong crowd, you know, the kind of guys who saw stealing and fighting as the only way out of this mess we called life. I remember my first time swiping something from a store like it was yesterday. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst right out of my chest. But I needed those sneakers, man, and I couldn't afford them any other way. So, I slipped them under my jacket and walked out like nothing happened. It was a rush, I won't lie. As the years rolled on, I got deeper into this messed up world of crime. Fist fights were a regular thing, and I didn't think twice about getting my hands dirty. It was like a never-ending cycle, and it was all I knew. I was just 16 when I ran into TJ. He was a bit older than me, had a wife and a bunch of kids to take care of. The crazy part was, his backstory was kinda like mine. We clicked right away, and our thing, well, we were both into stealing. First time we crossed paths, it was like destiny or something. We both came from rough neighborhoods, where you had to be street smart to survive. Our families didn't have much, so we thought we had to snatch what we needed. TJ had this slick, streetwise charm that pulled people in, and he had all the hustles down pat. It didn't take us long to become partners in crime, like two peas in a pod. We'd hit stores, grab stuff, and bolt like there was no tomorrow. It was like a rush, man, making us feel untouchable. We'd split the loot, which helped our families scrape by. It was messed up, but it was how we made it work. Man, it's wild when I think back on those days. We were always on the move, you know, just strolling the streets, grabbing whatever we could, but the funny thing was, we never had much green in our pockets. We couldn't even rustle up enough moolah to score a cold brew or get the ingredients for a half-decent meal. Money? Nah, it was like it had an escape plan, always slipping through our fingers. We'd hit up spots, work our hustle, and yeah, we'd have something to show for it. But it was never enough. We'd be eyeing that six-pack of beer or dreaming about whipping up some grub that wasn't just ramen noodles, but the numbers just didn't add up. It's like we were playing a never-ending game of catch-up with our wallets, and guess what? We were losing. We'd scrape together whatever pennies we could, counting them out like we were hoping for a miracle. but it was a never-ending struggle. You'd think with all the action we were seeing on the streets, we'd be rolling in the dough, but it was always slipping away like sand through our fingers. So there we were, out there hustling, but still hustling just to make ends meet. It's crazy how sometimes life keeps you on that grind, even when you're doing whatever it takes to get ahead. Yeah, I remember, man. We came up with this crazy idea to deal with our cash crunch. We started whipping up this makeshift drug by mixing wood glue with thinner, and yeah, we actually used it. It was like something out of a messed up DIY chemistry experiment. We'd blend those two ingredients together, and believe it or not, we'd get something that gave us a weird kind of high. It was all we could afford, and it helped us forget, at least for a little while, how broke we were. Looking back, it was nuts, and I can't believe we resorted to that stuff. Desperate times, right? But it's a reminder of just how low we were and how far we've come since those rough days. Back when we were just doing small-time thefts to snag a couple of brewskis and a glass of that dirt-cheap wine, there was this crazy city rumor going round. People were yakking about some gay dudes living out in the woods, way out there, who supposedly were big-time Satan worshippers. Now, these weren't just any dudes. They had this massive pad right smack in the middle of the forest. The kicker was when they threw their parties, they weren't serving your run-of-the-mill snacks. Nah, they were dishing out LSD, weed, and enough booze to fill a bathtub. Well, my curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to see what all the fuss was about. TJ, who was a die-hard Christian, tried to talk me out of it, saying it was a bad idea. But you know how it goes, I just had to check it out for myself. So, against TJ's advice, I headed to that villa in the woods, all on my lonesome. So, picture this. I'm behind the wheel of that old rust bucket we called a car, driving down this dark, twisty forest road for a whole stinking hour. I had no GPS, no directions, just a burning curiosity leading the way. I was on a mission to track down that legendary villa everyone was chattering about. Finally, I roll up to the joint, and holy smokes, it was a sight. I'm talking about this massive, imposing door that practically dared you to knock on it. And to top it all off, right up there on the door frame, in all its eye-popping glory, was this gigantic hot pink demonic sign. Yeah, you read that right, hot pink. It was so out there, it felt like something straight out of a crazy dream. So we're talking about the rad 80s, man. Back then, things weren't as, well, let's say, out there as they are today. So when I found myself in front of that villa, you can bet I was all kinds of hyped up, curious, and yeah, a little freaked out. My heart was thumping like a bass drum at a rock concert, but I couldn't resist the pull of that eerie place. I mean, it had been the talk of the town, and I had to see what the fuss was all about. After all, who could resist a big pink demonic sign plastered right on top of the door? It was like something out of a crazy 80s horror flick. But curiosity got the best of me, and I mustered up the courage to hit that doorbell. Ding dong. The sound echoed through the forest, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. It was one of those moments where you're standing on the edge of the unknown, not knowing if you're about to step into a wild adventure or a total nightmare. But hey, I was all in, ready to see what this mysterious villa had in store. So, there I am, right? Heart still racing from ringing that doorbell. After a few nail-biting seconds, the door swings open, and out pops this tall, sharp-dressed cat who goes by the name Michael. Now get this, he's got this big old dog with him, and I'm thinking, oh, is this where things go south? But you know what? Surprise, surprise, the dude's all smiles and handshakes, greeting me like we're long-lost buddies. He even gives me the green light to step inside. Man, I gotta admit, I was pretty taken aback by his kindness. I was ready for some dark, mysterious vibes, but instead I met with this friendly fella and his furry sidekick. It was like walking into a whole different world. So, I step inside, right? And what do I see? This massive garden, like it was a freaking jungle in there. And in the middle of all this greenery, there were two cribs, a big fancy mansion and a smaller, cozier villa. The big one? It was like a library on a Sunday morning, dead quiet. But the smaller villa? Oh man, that place was the total opposite. It was lit up like a Christmas tree, but instead of the usual holiday colors, it was all decked out in red and pink lights, casting this kind of eerie glow through the weirdly shaped windows. I couldn't help but be drawn to that smaller joint. I mean, it was like the heart of the party, and I was itching to find out what was going on in there. The whole scene was starting to feel like one of those 80s movies where things are about to get crazy wild. So, I step into that smaller villa, and let me tell you, it was like a sardine can in there. Packed to the gills with people, chatting it up, and having a blast. And you know what? A bunch of them looked just like me, from the way we dressed to the way we carried ourselves. But here's where things took a twist, the party decorations. Man, oh man, everything was decked out in pink, and I'm not talking soft, pastel pink. No, this was like hot pink, neon pink, you name it. Plus, they've got human skulls just casually hanging out on the tables like they're funky centerpieces or something. Talk about a conversation starter. So, Michael introduces me to this young dude named JJ, who he says is his roommate. But I get the feeling they're more than just roomies, if you catch my drift. Michael also mentions that JJ's the host with the most for the evening. And let me tell you, JJ did not disappoint. He sets me up with liquor, weed, and even some LSD, like it's an all-you-can-eat buffet of mind-benders. The tunes? Loud as hell, man. We're talking speakers shaking the walls. People are all over the place, some deep in chatter, others just doing their thing in the corners. But here's the thing, apart from the wild decor and the unconventional vibe, the night played out pretty chill. No craziness, no drama, just a bunch of folks having a good time. So, as the night rolls on, I'm feeling pretty floaty, thanks to the booze and the trippy stuff, and I decide it's time to head back to the city. Picture me stumbling out of there, all drunk and high, in the middle of the night. It was one heck of a journey, let me tell you that. So, the morning after that wild and crazy night, when I was still feeling the aftermath of being both hammered and tripping, TJ comes knocking. I couldn't wait to spill the beans about the previous night's adventure. I'm laying it all out for him, right? The pink palace, the skulls on the tables, the wild crowd, and a whole trippy vibe. But here's the kicker, TJ's looking at me like he's just seen a ghost. Dude's got this mix of surprise and, I swear, a hint of jealousy in his eyes. He's like, man, you got that drunk and high for free, that's wild. And then he drops the bomb, he wants in on the action. He's all, next time I'm rolling with you and we're gonna have a blast. I couldn't help but grin, thinking about TJ getting in on the action. If he thought my story was wild, just wait till he experiences it firsthand. It was like the start of a whole new adventure, and I couldn't wait to see how it would play out with my partner in crime by my side. So the very next day, which happened to be a good old Monday, TJ and I hopped into that trusty old junker and headed back to the villa. TJ, true to form, was still dabbling with our homemade glue stuff. But I had to remind him, dude, hold off on that, we're in for some top shelf stuff tonight. TJ was practically bouncing in his seat with excitement, kept asking me about what was in store the whole way there. You could tell he was eager to dive headfirst into the luxury drug experience. We roll up to the villa, and guess who's there to welcome us? None other than JJ, the Pink Villa's master, along with his big furry companion. And, just like last time, he's all smiles and welcomes us in like long-lost pals. But here's the twist. Unlike the previous night's jam-packed party, this time, it's just us four. We wander into the smaller mansion, and let's just say things got wild. We're talking booze flowing like a river and getting so high we could touch the moon. It was a crazy, intimate night, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. That night, man, it was something else, the most epic night of my life, no doubt. But now, here I am, stuck behind these grim walls and bars. Years have flown by, and I can't help but replay every single moment of that unforgettable night in my head, living every second of it all over again. So, back in the day, Michael, he was this smooth, well-dressed dude in his 50s, JJ a bit younger, and I was just teetering on the edge of my youth. Now, TJ, he was the seasoned one, a whole decade older than me. And let me tell you, it was a night to remember. Michael, he had this sophisticated aura, and you could tell he'd been around the block, probably had one heck of an education under his belt. But what really stood out was how great of a listener he was. Even when TJ was tossing back those drinks and cracking jokes about his wild, tipsy life, Michael was hanging on every word. The wild part? Despite the obvious gap in social status, he treated us like we were all on the same level. It was like a taste of being real, like a genuine human being for the first time. At least that's how it felt for me. Now, JJ, he was all about the kindness and generosity. That night he made sure we were living the high life, no holds barred. Now, fast forward to the middle of the night, and things got a little, well, you could say they got wild. We're talking dressing up, really going all out, and it was smack in the middle of the night when we were in full-on drag mode. But I'll let you use your imagination for the rest. Let's just say it was a night for the books, and those memories are gonna stick with me forever, no matter where life takes me. That night with Michael in front of TJ and JJ, man, it was like hitting the jackpot of feelings. So, that morning after our wild adventure, we stuck around at that mysterious villa. JJ, that hospitality king, whipped up this amazing breakfast spread. I'm talking bacon, eggs, pancakes, the works. After we scarfed it all down, we hopped in our trusty old junker and headed back home. Now, things got kinda weird on the ride back. TJ didn't say a word to me. It was like there was this thick cloud of tension hanging over us. We pulled up near my place, and that's when things took a really ugly turn. TJ, he yanked me out of the car, and man, he started wailing on me. He smacked my head against the car multiple times, going off on me, calling me all sorts of nasty names, saying I was some kind of messed up pervert. It was like the complete opposite of the wild and free night we'd had just hours ago. It left me feeling totally shell-shocked, man. My head and face were wrecked, dude, all banged up and bleeding. I'm trying to reason with TJ, like, look, man, I'm not some pervert or anything. What happened with Michael, it was just because I was out of my mind, drunk and high as a kite, you know? And honestly, I was buying into that story myself. But TJ, he wasn't having any of it. He's still fuming, like, no way, you're a total pervert, and keeps laying into me. It felt like a messed up deja vu, going from the high of that epic night to this low point right outside my place. It was like a crazy roller coaster, and I couldn't believe how fast things had taken a nosedive. So, after that wild night, TJ and I had this major falling out, and it felt like he just wouldn't talk to me, like I'd suddenly turned into the world's biggest piece of garbage. To be honest, his words got to me, and I started to believe all that crap myself. I mean, it was like this dark cloud just hanging over my head all the time. But then, about a week later, TJ finally decides to show his face. And let me tell you, I missed the dude like crazy. At that point, I was so desperate for some human connection that I was willing to go along with whatever he had in mind. So, what does he do? He starts laying out this wild plan like they're the worst perverts on the planet. He's all about hitting up their villa, robbing them blind, and even talking about taking things to a whole new level, if you catch my drift. He's convinced they're these hermit-like Satanists living out in the boonies, probably hoarding cash at home instead of trusting the banks. TJ's got it all figured out, man, saying we should strike on a night when their place is quiet and get the job done. Honestly, it felt like TJ had gone from one extreme to the other, and it left me seriously questioning everything. But I didn't have anyone else at that point, so I was kinda stuck between a rock and a hard place, you know. Back then, I was young and impressionable, and TJ had this way of convincing me to do things I never thought I'd do, like stealing and, man, even talking about murder. We spent countless nights staking out their place, waiting for the right moment. It felt like forever, but finally, the stars aligned, and that fateful night arrived. Just the four of us. TJ had snagged a gun from somewhere, and we were armed and ready. So there we were in the dead of night. JJ was busy doing his thing in the kitchen of the big mansion, and TJ, Michael, and I were in the pink one. Then, in the middle of that dark night, TJ disappeared for a bit. He went back to our trusty old junkyard and came back, holding that gun up to Michael's head. He tells him, "Game over, you gay bastard." At first, Michael laughs, thinking it's some kind of twisted joke. But it didn't take long for him to realize this was deadly serious. He starts spelling that his money is all in the bank and he's got nothing stashed at home. I'm all riled up and high as a kite on LSD, not even fully grasping the gravity of the situation. We tied up Michael's hands and feet with some rope we had on hand and taped his mouth shut. TJ stayed behind with him, and me, well, I headed to the big mansion, ready for whatever was coming next. I sprinted toward the Bezig mansion, clutching a gun in my hand, completely out of my mind on drugs. Inside, JJ was belting out a tune and whipping up something in the kitchen. Their massive dog was catching some Z's nearby. So I burst into the scene, gun in hand, and I'm like, "Hey man, you better spill the beans. Where's the cash?" JJ, he froze for a sec, but then the fear kicked in. He grabs a kitchen knife, and that beast of a dog they had, it decided it was time to join the party, lunging at me. I lost it, man. I squeezed the trigger, and that poor dog got a bullet to the brain. It went down like a ton of bricks. Then, without skipping a beat, I aimed that gun at JJ's face and pulled the trigger again. It was like something straight out of a nightmare. So I make my way back to the pink mansion, and with TJ's help, we drag Michael into the kitchen of the big one. We ain't giving up, so we hit him with the same question. "Come on, dude, where's the cash stash?" TJ peels that tape off Michael's mouth, and man, it's a gruesome sight. Michael takes in JJ's messed up face and his dog sprawled out on the floor, and he just lets out this eerie scream. He starts crawling over toward JJ's lifeless body, his eyes locked onto the wall like he's seen a ghost. Then, out of nowhere, he mutters, "I've seen this before." Before I even think, my hand jerks, and I squeeze off 3 shots right into his forehead. It's like something out of a dark movie, man. I turn my gaze toward the wall that had Michael all fixated before he bit the dust. And what do I see? A dang fine portrait of Michael, like it was some fancy artwork. There's this big all sign slapped right on the wall beneath it, and the painting, well, it's got his mouth sealed shut with tape, and those same 3 gunshot holes in his forehead. It's like the painting's a blast from the past or something, man. So, on that grim night, we ended up coming away empty-handed from that villa, not a single valuable thing in sight. The next day, things between TJ and me hit rock bottom, and we went our separate ways. Not long after, they nabbed TJ, and I turned myself into the cops a day later. Now, when we got to court, TJ tried to spin it like he did a good deed, claiming he'd off 2 Satan worshippers. But the court wasn't buying it. They slapped him with a death sentence, but after some pleading and showing some remorse, his lawyer managed to swing it to life imprisonment. As for me, I owned up to what I'd done, showed some remorse too, and ended up with a life sentence as well. Here's the kicker though. During the whole trial, all the folks from the neighboring villages, they were on our side. They believed we'd taken out a couple of real devils. They even organized a campaign to support us. We had some die-hard fans, believe it or not. Man, it's been over 3 decades since all that went down. TJ, he passed away from natural causes in some other prison. As for me, I still haven't had the chance to dive into all the books that Michael cranked out in his short life. He was quite the character in the 80s, a literate, cultured, and all-around welcoming guy who set up a love shack in the middle of the woods with his family's cook, a haven for all us freedom lovers. The crazy part? He somehow knew he'd meet his maker ahead of time, like he had it all figured out. Michael, he was a real stand-up guy, a scientist even, and it's tough for me to reckon with the fact that my youthful ignorance led to his demise. But now, man, it's like I've got this weird affection for the guy. I can't help but think back to that kiss we shared and that unforgettable night. In his memoirs, he put it straight, saying, "I'm no Satanist or anything like that. I just slapped a satanic sign on my door as a middle finger to religion." Michael, he was something else, a truly great man. A few days after those dark times, the folks from around the area went and torched Michael and JJ's house, thinking they were getting rid of the devil. Now, there's nothing left of those 2 beautiful homes but a pile of rubble. People trek over there as tourists, like it's some kind of haunted spot, and they swear they hear a man screaming. Sometimes they talk about hearing a big dog's howl. Here I am, locked up behind bars, but word on the street is that the place has turned into some ghost museum. Visitors claim they can hear Michael's guitar strumming and even his last breath as he met his end. But let me tell you, all that's just superstition. I'm the only one who knows what really happened and heard Michael's final cry, his killer. The end. El Hagoresh.
Be sure to like our content and stay tuned by subscribing.